Georgia's two Republican senators are facing runoffs next month, are coming out in support of the Texas Attorney General. The Texas Attorney General is suing four battleground states, including Georgia, over the election results. Attorney General Ken Paxton claims that Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan exploited the COVID-19 pandemic to justify ignoring federal and state election laws. He also claims the state unlawfully enacted last-minute changes that skewed the results of the 2020 general election. Specifically in Georgia, the lawsuit is looking at the signature verification process, rejected absentee ballot rate, along with consent decree related to curing ballots. Again, the Secretary of State's office has said over and over that Georgia's election was fair and just. Paxton is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to block the states from casting their electoral college votes next Monday. Meanwhile, Jon Ossoff is attacking his opponent, Senator David Perdue, for supporting what he calls a baseless lawsuit pointed at his own state. He sent us this statement that says, in part, Senator Perdue persists in his attack on black voters despite the pleas of Georgia's Republican election officials who have warned that Perdue's support for Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the election result is a baseless attack on democracy that is putting election workers' lives at risk. And this just in.